Blanche, I'm sorry to see you under these circumstances. There's been the most tremendous outpouring of love and affection since you released the news publicly that Bob Hawke had died. What sort of comfort has that been to you?
It's been a comfort, and it's also been a painful, because it brings up all the emotion of his dying. But one of the things, it has been marvellous for the country to have its heart softened, I think, by the thought of a part of them going away forever.
Did Mr Hawke have a true sense of how much the public loved him?
I think he probably did, but he never spoke about it. I think he did.
Do you remember the first time you ever saw Bob Hawke?
Yes.
What happened?
I didn't know who his name was. I thought his name was Robin. And we were in Jakarta and at a party, and somebody just said, oh, I didn't know that he was famous. Somebody said, oh, and this is Bob Hawke, and he was just another visiting fireman as far as I was concerned. I was an embassy wife, and my job was to take visiting firemen around Jakarta. And so we sat down and chatted, and I worked out at that moment that he was a really good guy.
When did you realise that you were in love with him?
In 1978, when he was madly in love with me. At the time then and afterwards, however, I used to feel very sad for Hazel. There's a French song, which I'm sure you know, it's called La Vie en Rose, and one verse is translated into English as "Take me to your arms again," and every time I sang it or hummed it or thought of it, I used to think of Hazel and feel very sad for her and think, oh, that's what she must be feeling.
From recollection of reading your book, after 1978, there was a long period of time when you and Mr Hawke weren't together. How did it then come about that you then did get back together, and how did you reconcile that with your feelings about feeling bad about Hazel?
We got back together because he hunted me down and rang me up. I didn't know this because he never told me, but some of his friends have told me that he used to say to them, I can't stop thinking about her. So there it had gone on. And my feelings about Hazel's sadness didn't change. I still always, really up until the end, felt that sorrow, and whenever I hear that song, I feel that sorrow for her.
What did you most admire about Mr Hawke?
Gee, he had enormous integrity, and he stuck to it all the way through. Integrity, honesty, very, very strong character. Really, that, and I would say a nobility of soul.
What was it like being the partner of such a gigantic figure, not just in public and being so famous, but also just such a big personality and a very big brain?
Well, it was wonderful. I loved it. And it didn't worry me at all that I was sort of the handbag in the background. I didn't care about that because I had my own sense of who I was and what I'd done, and I'd had a career before him. And yeah, it was lovely. And it was wonderful to see how people were drawn to him and how they were uplifted by him, always. People went away from a meeting with Bob happy.
Did that drain him to have to be giving like that all the time?
Only once he was ill, and then he just couldn't see more than 2 or 3 people at a time, and only then for about 20 minutes.
What was the final year of Mr Hawke's life like?
It was both difficult and it was also one of the best times of our lives because we were so close and intimate during that time while I was his main carer. And we often said to each other, we've been blessed to have this period together. We didn't... Now, Lee, you're going to make me cry.
I'm trying not to. I'm trying really hard not to, so I'm sorry.
Okay, well, we didn't have the joy of young love. He had that with Hazel, but we had the joy of mature love and then the love of old age. And people don't realise, now I really am not going to cry, how wonderful it can be to look after somebody you love when they're old and dying.
How do you think the love of old age does differ to young love? Because people don't talk about this very often.
I know and they're frightened of death and etc. He had, number one, he had no fear of death. Number two, he was determined he was going to die at home and not in hospital. So the difference is that there's a great deal of softness, there's a great deal of intimacy, there are no secrets, there are no pretenses. You're getting the true human being on both sides.
How did Mr Hawke's reconciliation with Mr Keating come about?
Paul really wanted to come over and see him. It was lovely. And it was great. They sat and they yarned about old times, and Paul came a few times. He'd been to dinner here before that when Bob was healthy and strong, and they always took each other's phone calls when there were party issues to discuss. So it wasn't as the press presented it, this daggers drawn, etc. It wasn't at all like that.
And in those final few meetings that they had, what sort of things did they used to talk about?
Old times. And laughing a lot. And things that they'd done together, and also how they hoped the country would develop.
Was any of the old rivalry left, or any of the feelings about that left, or was it all just completely gone?
Vanished. Absolutely vanished.
Mr Hawke had many, many achievements, as has been widely discussed since he died. Of which one or ones do you think he was the most proud?
Oh, gosh. He was very proud of Antarctica. He was very proud of what he'd done to help free Nelson Mandela and end apartheid. He had a very large role in that. And strangely, he was very proud of the fact that he was patron of a small charity which is called Engineering Aid, which encourages Indigenous kids to become engineers, or at least to go on with their education. And that was a source of great joy and pride to him, because a number of them who would never have thought of going to university or continuing their education did so, and a number became engineers.
Did Mr Hawke get to vote in the election last weekend?
No. He decided he wasn't going to postal vote. He was going to go up in his wheelchair and vote, but he didn't get there.
We did an interview about a year ago and we spoke about the fact that Mr Hawke was in the twilight of his life, and you said that you had both prepared for that. Has being prepared and discussing it as you did helped when it has finally happened?
Enormously. I did I think the majority of my grieving back then, and I was in a terrible state. I lost, I don't know, 3 kilos or something, which at my size is a lot of weight to lose, and I couldn't sleep, and I'd burst into tears at the drop of a hat, and etc. I will still burst into tears, so please don't drop a hat. But yes, that certainly prepared me, and he was more than prepared. He was very keen to die. In fact, 2 days before he died, we had a friend over here, very old friend, and he said to her, "Oh, it's not long now, it's very soon."
Do you think that Mr Hawke felt that he had finished all the business that he needed to finish? He was done?
Exactly. And he said to me, I can't make any further contribution. I've got no contribution to make now, which was one of the reasons he wanted to die, because he thought of his life as contributing to society. And once that was over...
Well, thank you very much for speaking to us on this occasion. I know the public will be pleased to hear from you, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.